The multi-billion-dollar screens inside the executive boardroom flashed a blinding, chaotic crimson. It was an emergency override. In less than 40 minutes, the entire legitimate corporate empire of the legendary Korean Mafia heir, Min-Jae Kang, was slated to be liquidated by international federal auditors. Down in the marble lobby, news cameras were already flashing. Armed federal agents were stepping out of black SUVs, ready to slap handcuffs on the most feared man in Seoul. His ruthless rivals were sitting in their penthouse suites, drinking expensive whiskey, celebrating the complete financial execution of the Kang dynasty. They thought they had backed the violent tiger into a dark corner. They expected him to pull out his hidden weapons, send his syndicate enforcers into the streets, and start an all-out bloodbath that would land him in a maximum security prison forever. They were dead wrong. Min-Jae didn't even reach for his gun. He didn't even reach for his satellite phone. Instead, he slowly leaned back in his leather executive chair, a faint, dangerous smirk playing on his sharp, handsome lips. His dark eyes, framed by the faint dark ink tattoo tracing up the right side of his neck, didn't look at the flashing red countdown timers. He was looking at the end of the long mahogany table. There sat Zuri. She was a brilliant, radiant black woman with dark, glowing skin, wearing a sharp, custom emerald green blazer that made her look like royalty. Her natural curls were pinned up in a pristine, elegant crown. She didn't look panicked. She didn't look scared. She didn't even stop sipping her hot chamomile tea. While 20 high-priced corporate lawyers were literally sweating through their designer suits and screaming into their phones, Zuri calmly opened her rose gold laptop. Her long, manicured fingers rested over the keys like a concert pianist, preparing to launch an absolute war. Min-Jae, darling, Zuri murmured, her voice smooth, calm, and utterly chilling in the silent room. Your rivals spent 3 years setting up this corporate trap. They really thought hiding their shell company in a tax haven would keep me out. She let out a soft, amused chuckle, looking up with eyes filled with absolute intellectual fire. It's honestly adorable. Give me 6 minutes. I'm about to turn their trap into their financial funeral. As Zuri hit the first key, the main elevator chimed. The glass doors slid open, revealing 6 heavily armed federal agents stepping onto the executive floor with an arrest warrant in hand. Hey Annie's Empire of Love family. Welcome back to another unhinged, high-stakes story. Before Zuri completely dismantles an entire criminal syndicate with just a keyboard, make sure to smash that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment below. Let us know, would you trust your wife to save a multi-billion-dollar empire, or are you calling a lawyer? Let's dive right back into the drama. The heavy, polished oak doors of the executive suite burst open with a loud, echoey slam. 6 federal agents, clad in dark, tactical jackets, marched into the room, led by a stern-faced lead investigator, holding a white document bearing an official government seal. The cold air from the hallway spilled inside, cutting through the warm, rich scent of expensive espresso and mahogany that usually filled Min-Jae's office. Min-Jae didn't even flinch. He didn't rise from his leather chair. Nor did the lethal stillness in his dark eyes alter as the lead agent stepped directly up to the table. Min-Jae Kang, the lead agent declared, his voice echoing off the floor-to-ceiling glass windows that overlooked the sprawling Seoul skyline. We have an emergency freezing order issued by the Central Banking Authority. Your family's holding company, Kang Global Enterprises, is under immediate federal seizure for illicit cross-border transfers totaling $400 million. Step away from the desk. The 20 high-priced corporate lawyers sitting around the table went completely pale. One elder attorney actually dropped his fountain pen, watching it roll off the table and splash into a glass of water. They knew what this meant. In South Korea, a federal freezing order of this magnitude meant instant liquidation. In less than 40 minutes, the entire legitimate side of the Kang family empire, the hotels, the shipping lines, the technology hubs, would be systematically auctioned off to satisfy public liabilities. Min-Jae's chief legal counsel leaned over, his voice shaking violently. Sir, we have to surrender your passport. If you resist, they will arrest you right here in front of the press lobby. We have no legal standing to block a central freeze. A tense, suffocating silence descended upon the room. The lead agent pulled a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt, the metallic click ringing out like a death knell. The agents behind him shifted their weight, their hands resting cautiously near their sidearms. They expected Min-Jae to react like the ruthless syndicate leader the street rumors claimed he was. They expected shouting, threats, or a signal to his hidden security detail. Min-Jae simply adjusted the cuff of his crisp white dress shirt, letting the dark, intricate ink tattoo on his wrist catch the light. "You are standing on my custom Italian rug with dirty boots, agent," Min-Jae said softly, his deep voice smooth as velvet and cold as ice. "And you are interrupting my wife's tea time." The lead agent blinked, visibly thrown off by the absolute lack of fear in the billionaire's demeanor. "Your wife? Mr. Kang? This is a federal seizure. Your assets are gone." At the far end of the long table, Zuri slowly set her porcelain teacup down on its saucer, with a tiny, delicate click. She straightened her emerald green blazer, smoothed out the folds of her trousers, and turned her attention fully toward the lead agent. Her dark, luminous skin glowed under the warm recessed lighting, and her dark eyes were sharp, calculating, and completely unbothered. "Agent Park, isn't it?" Zuri asked, her voice rich, calm, and filled with a terrifying level of authority. "I suggest you take a very close look at the red seal on the bottom right corner of that warrant you're holding so proudly." Agent Park hesitated, his brow furrowing as he looked down at the paper in his hand. "This is a fully executed court order, signed by the chief prosecutor, signed 32 minutes ago under Section 4 of the Emergency Financial Asset Act, correct?" Zuri interrupted, resting her chin on her hand with a small, amused smile. "Which would be completely valid if Kang Global Enterprises were still registered as a domestic holding firm." She tapped a single key on her rose-gold laptop. Instantly, the massive crimson warning screens across the boardroom wall flickered, vanished, and were replaced by a bright, clean blue database interface. 3 hours ago, while your team was busy leaking fake press releases to the media, I executed a legal restructuring, Zuri explained, her fingers dancing effortlessly across her keyboard. "I transferred 82% of Kang Global's core liquid equity into an offshore educational and tech infrastructure trust based in Singapore. A trust, I might add, that is registered under my maiden name." The chief legal counsel's jaw literally dropped. He stared at Zuri as if she had just walked on water. "Mrs. Kang. You moved $400 million in 3 hours without triggering the central clearinghouse?" "I didn't move it," Zuri chuckled softly, tossing her head back as her natural curls bounced gracefully. "I reclassified it as an institutional foreign grant. Korean federal auditors have zero jurisdiction over foreign educational grants without a 90-day diplomatic review. Which means, Agent Park, your shiny freezing order is currently about as useful as a used napkin." Agent Park's face flushed a deep, embarrassing shade of red. He hastily snatched his tablet from an assistant, his fingers swiping wildly through the central banking database. As the screen confirmed Zuri's words, his eyes widened in sheer disbelief. The seizure order was invalid. The frozen accounts were completely empty because the money no longer legally belonged to the domestic entity. "This is absurd." Agent Park barked, his calm posture evaporating into pure panic. "Who authorized this transaction? You're not even an officer of this board." "I am the chief executive trustee," Zuri replied calmly, leaning back and lacing her fingers together. "And more importantly, I am the woman who spent 4 years studying international corporate tax law at Oxford, while my husband was busy being feared by people like you." Min-Jae let out a low, rumbling laugh that vibrated through the room. He reached across the table, taking Zuri's hand and pressing a gentle, lingering kiss against her knuckles. The contrast between his lethal dark presence and her brilliant, elegant composure sent a visible shockwave through every lawyer in the room. "You heard my wife, Agent Park," Min-Jae murmured, his dark eyes locking onto the lead investigator with terrifying intensity. "You have 5 seconds to clear your men out of my office before I file a harassment lawsuit against your department that will cost you your pension." Agent Park swallowed hard, his throat dry. He stiffly ordered his men to lower their posture. "This isn't over, Mr. Kang. Someone leaked the internal transaction logs that triggered this investigation in the first place. There is an informant inside your inner circle, a high-ranking executive who gave us your private ledger codes." Min-Jae's smile vanished, replaced by an edge of dangerous steel. He looked around the table at his 20 executives and lawyers, who suddenly couldn't look him in the eye. "I know," Zuri spoke up sweetly, breaking the heavy tension. She turned her laptop screen toward the room, displaying a live satellite tracking map with a small, blinking red dot moving rapidly toward the airport. "In fact, I traced the digital signature of the leak 20 minutes ago. The mole is currently sitting in a yellow taxi on the Mapo Bridge, carrying a duffel bag containing $2 million in untraceable bearer bonds." Min-Jae looked at the screen, then looked back at Zuri, a look of profound, unconditional admiration washing over his sharp features. "You already tracked the taxi?" "Darling, I didn't just track the taxi." Zuri smirked, hitting one final key on her board. "I remotely locked its electric doors and rerouted its GPS straight to your private docks." Deep beneath the city, the yellow taxi carrying the traitor suddenly veered off the highway onto a dark, deserted gravel road leading toward the foggy harbor, its electronic locks clicking dead shut from the inside. The heavy rain began to lash against the glass windows of the executive suite, casting long, dramatic shadows across the boardroom table. The federal agents had retreated down the private elevators in total disgrace, leaving behind a room filled with terrified executives who didn't dare to breathe. Min-Jae slowly rose from his seat. His tall, imposing frame towered over the mahogany table, his dark, custom suit immaculate, and the subtle ink on his neck catching the dim, moody light of the stormy afternoon. He walked around the table with slow, deliberate steps, the leather of his designer shoes making a quiet, rhythmic sound against the polished floor. Every single attorney in the room lowered their eyes, terrified that Min-Jae's legendary Mafia temper was about to explode. Instead, Min-Jae walked straight behind Zuri's chair. He placed his broad, warm hands gently on her shoulders, leaning down to rest his chin near her cheek. "You locked a grown man in an electric taxi and sent him to the docks?" Min-Jae murmured softly into her ear, a rare, genuinely entertained smile softening his stern features. "When did you become more terrifying than my enforcers, my love?" Zuri took a quiet sip of her tea, completely unbothered by the tense atmosphere in the room. "The moment I realized your legal team was paying millions of dollars to men who panic at the first sign of a government piece of paper. Honestly, Min-Jae, these lawyers need a vacation or a new profession. A toddler with an iPad could have spotted that fake search warrant." A few of the younger attorneys blushed deep red, looking down at their notes in utter embarrassment. "I don't need lawyers when I have you," Min-Jae replied smoothly, pressing a light kiss to her temple. But as he straightened up and turned back to the remaining board members, his warm tone instantly dissolved into pure ice. "Clear the room, every single one of you. Leave your laptops, your access badges, and your phones on this table. You are all suspended until my wife finishes her audit." Within 10 seconds, the boardroom was completely empty, the disgraced executives scrambling out the door like terrified mice. Min-Jae walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the foggy harbor in the distance where his syndicate enforcers were already waiting for the yellow taxi to arrive. He folded his arms across his chest, his jaw set tight. "That informant didn't act alone, Zuri," Min-Jae said softly, his voice dropping into that quiet, dangerous register that made rivals shudder. "The ledger codes he tried to sell are classified under my uncle's private clearance. Director Shin." Zuri stopped typing. She looked up at her husband, her dark eyes narrowing with intense concentration. Director Shin was Min-Jae's late father's sworn brother, a veteran member of the syndicate, who had publicly supported Min-Jae's transition into legitimate corporate business, but secretly controlled the syndicate's old-school underground operations. If Director Shin is feeding corporate information to federal auditors, he isn't just trying to destroy Kang Global Enterprises, Zuri reasoned, her mind working at lightning speed. He's trying to bankrupt you legally, so the underground council forces you out. He wants to take back control of the docks and the illegal smuggling routes. He thinks I've gone soft, Min-Jae said with a dark, bitter chuckle. He thinks because I wear a silk tie and married a brilliant, beautiful woman from overseas, I've forgotten how to handle traitors. He wants a war. Well, he's going to get one, Zuri declared, snapping her rose gold laptop shut with a sharp clack. Except, we aren't going to fight him with guns on the street. That's exactly what he wants. If you use violence, the federal government gets an excuse to lock you up forever, and his plan succeeds. Min-Jae turned around, looking at his wife with intense fascination. Then how do we crush him? Zuri stood up, smoothing down her emerald green blazer with complete grace. We cut off his breathing room. Director Shin thinks he controls the underground council because he funds their illegal operations through offshore shell banks. But guess who just reclassified those exact shell bank routing numbers into international tech grants an hour ago? Min-Jae's dark eyes flashed with sudden realization. You didn't just save my legitimate corporate assets. I unintentionally seized Director Shin's private slush fund. Zuri smiled, her eyes twinkling with brilliant, mischievous delight. As of right now, your dangerous uncle is legally broke. He can't even pay his own bodyguards. Suddenly, Min-Jae's private encrypted phone began to vibrate violently on the table. The caller ID displayed a red, unlisted syndicate icon. Director Shin. Min-Jae picked up the phone, tapping the speaker button so Zuri could hear. Before Min-Jae could even speak, a harsh, gravelly voice barked through the speaker in furious Korean. Min-Jae, what game are you playing? Director Shin roared, the sound of heavy rain pouring in the background on his end. My private accounts in Zurich were just frozen. My bankers are telling me the authorization code came from your executive terminal. Unfreeze my money immediately, or I will call an emergency meeting of the syndicate elders tonight and declare you a traitor to the family. Min-Jae didn't even raise his voice. He calmly reached over, pulled Zuri close by her waist, and looked down at her as he spoke into the microphone. You should speak more respectfully, uncle, Min-Jae said coldly. You aren't talking to me. You are talking to the chief executive trustee of Kang Global. And she doesn't take orders from men who leak company secrets to federal agents. There was a sudden, horrified pause on the line. What? What did you say? Director Shin stammered, his confident rage instantly wavering. Your foreign wife did this? My brilliant wife just stripped you of every dollar you owned in 3 button clicks, Min-Jae growled into the phone. If you want to meet the syndicate elders tonight, bring your appetite. Because Zuri is bringing your financial autopsy report to the table. Min-Jae hung up the phone without waiting for a reply. Zuri let out a loud, melodramatic sigh, fanning herself playfully with a folder. A syndicate elders meeting? Honey, do I need to wear a formal dress for this? Or can I just wear my executioner blazer? Min-Jae pulled her into a tight, warm embrace, burying his face into her soft curls as his dark laugh echoed through the room. Wear whatever you want, my queen. Tonight, you rule the underworld. Just as they stepped into the private executive elevator to head down to the garage, the elevator lights suddenly flickered wildly. The emergency brakes screeched to a halt, and the entire building's power shut off, plunging them into pitch-black darkness, deep between floors. The steel cables groaned in the darkness, the backup generators whining as a dim. Red emergency light flickered to life inside the elevator shaft. The air suddenly felt thick, heavy, and metallic. Min-Jae's reaction was instantaneous. Within a fraction of a second, his body pivoted, positioning his broad frame between Zuri and the doors. His hand slid into the inner lining of his suit jacket, wrapping tightly around the cool, dark steel of his concealed firearm. His eyes narrowed, scanning the shadowy corners of the high-speed elevator cabin. Stay behind me, Min-Jae commanded, his voice dropping into a low, lethal whisper. This wasn't a standard power outage. The main grid has a triple redundant bypass. Zuri didn't scream. She didn't panic or freeze up. Instead, she calmly pulled her phone from her pocket, using the ambient glow of the screen to illuminate her rose-gold laptop, which was still humming quietly under her arm. They didn't cut the main power, Min-Jae, Zuri murmured, her fingers already swiping across her screen with terrifying precision. Someone initiated a physical bypass from the building's basement control room. They tripped the security protocol to trap us in this shaft. Above them, a heavy metallic clanking noise echoed down the elevator shaft. Heavy boots were moving across the top of the elevator car. Min-Jae raised his weapon toward the ceiling hatch, his jaw locked in a hard line. Director Shin is getting desperate. He knows if we reach the syndicate meeting tonight with those financial documents, his legacy is finished. Well, his timing is terrible, Zuri muttered, tapping her screen. I was just about to order dinner. Suddenly, the top hatch of the elevator was violently pried open with a crowbar, sending dust and paint chips showering down on them. A masked figure in tactical gear thrust a submachine gun barrel down through the opening, aimed directly toward the floor of the cabin. Before the gunman could pull the trigger, Min-Jae fired 2 swift, silenced rounds straight up through the hatch. The muffled thwip-thwip echoed in the small space, followed by a grunt of pain as the assassin's weapon clattered onto the top of the elevator car and fell down the dark shaft. Hold on. Min-Jae growled, grabbing Zuri around her waist with one arm while firing 2 more rounds into the manual release lock on the side panel. With a deafening screech of grinding metal, the emergency brakes unlocked, and the elevator car dropped 4 feet in a sudden, heart-stopping freefall before slamming violently into the shock absorbers on the 4th floor. The doors jolted open 3 inches. Outside, 2 more armed men were waiting in the shadows of the dark hallway. Zuri, when I push these doors, move to the left. Min-Jae ordered, his knuckles white against his grip. Wait. Zuri shouted, grabbing his arm. Don't shoot. What? Look at the floor. Zuri pointed her phone light through the small crack in the door. Tracing along the marble tiles of the 4th floor was a thick, chemical foam of fire suppression gel meant to instantly extinguish electrical fires. A sharp, brilliant smirk spread across Zuri's face. She shoved her hand into her purse, pulled out a small metallic cylinder containing compressed lithium air duster, a tool she used to clean her laptop keyboard, and tossed it right between her husband's feet. Min-Jae, shoot the canister when it hits the hall, Zuri yelled. Min-Jae didn't ask questions. He trusted her implicitly. He kicked the heavy elevator doors open with a sharp, forceful blow, threw the pressurized cylinder into the hallway, and raised his gun. The 2 masked men raised their rifles to open fire, but Min-Jae squeezed the trigger mid-air. Bang! The bullet struck the lithium cylinder right above the chemical fire gel. A blinding, localized concussive flash erupted in the hallway, sending a massive shockwave of spark and dense smoke surging toward the attackers. The sudden chemical reaction ignited a bright, harmless pop that completely blinded the gunmen's night vision goggles, sending them stumbling backward into the walls, disoriented and groaning in pain. Min-Jae stepped out into the smoke like a dark phantom, systematically disarming both men with 2 swift, brutal strikes before kicking their weapons far down the corridor. He dusted off his sleeves, completely unbothered, and turned back to the elevator. Zuri stepped out of the shaft, holding her heels in one hand and her laptop in the other, completely unruffled except for a single curl out of place. Lithium air dusters mixed with industrial fire gel, Zuri said, sliding her heels back onto her feet with an effortless grace. Creates an immediate flashbang effect without destroying the drywall. You're welcome. Min-Jae stared at her, his dark eyes wide with an intoxicating mixture of awe and absolute adoration. He walked up to her, grabbed her face gently with both hands, and pulled her into a deep, passionate kiss right there in the smoke-filled hallway. I am the luckiest Mafia boss in Asia, Min-Jae breathed against her lips, his rare, devastating smile flashing in the dim emergency light. Don't forget it, Zuri winked, adjusting her blazer. Now come on. Your uncle thinks he trapped us, but my phone just connected to the building's backup satellite dish. I just sent his entire offshore tax evasion dossier straight to the syndicate elder's personal tablets. Min-Jae took her hand, gripping it tightly as they hurried down the service stairs toward his armored SUV waiting in the underground garage. What did the elders say? They just replied. Zuri smiled, showing him her phone screen. On the screen was a message from the oldest, most feared traditional leader of the Korean underground. Bring the girl. Director Shin is standing trial tonight. As Min-Jae opened the heavy passenger door of the armored vehicle for his wife, the vehicle's dashboard radio suddenly crackled with static, and a desperate, distorted voice blared through the speakers. It was Director Shin. Realization dawning on him as he realized his hit squad had failed. Min-Jae, listen to me. Director Shin screamed over the static. You think you won? The elders will never accept a foreigner running the financial bloodline of the syndicate. They will execute both of you the moment you step into the ancestral estate. The armored black SUV sliced through the heavy, torrential downpour as it roared down the winding, dark mountain road leading to the ancestral Kang estate. Min-Jae drove with one hand firm on the leather-wrapped steering wheel, his knuckles white, while his other hand remained tightly interwoven with Zuri's. Inside the cabin, the silence was thick, charged with the electric realization that they were driving directly into the lion's den. The traditional elder council was notorious for its strict ancient customs. They were old-world traditionalists who measured power in bloodlines and honor, and Director Shin was banking entirely on their deep-seated prejudice to save his neck. Min-Jae, Zuri said softly, breaking the steady hum of the engine. She tapped the illuminated tablet resting on her lap. Shin isn't just relying on old-school bigotry. He set up a trap for the elders too. Look at these real-time offshore ledger transfers. Min-Jae glanced sideways at the glowing screen for a fraction of a second. He's bribed them? Worse, Zuri replied, her dark eyes flashing with cold, brilliant intellect. He's been secretly buying up their adult children's foreign debts in Macau and London for the past 5 years. Every single elder sitting at that table tonight has a son or daughter whose financial freedom is owned by one of Shin's shell companies. He doesn't need them to like him, Min-Jae. He holds the leash on their families. Min-Jae's jaw tightened, his sharp eyes darkening like a storm cloud over the dark road. If he holds their children's debt, they will vote to strip my leadership and hand the corporate empire to him, regardless of what evidence you present regarding the corporate leak. They would, Zuri agreed, a slow, confident smile curving her lips as she leaned her head against the leather headrest. If those debt bonds were still under Shin's control. Min-Jae's head snapped toward her, a spark of pure astonishment in his eyes. Zuri, what did you do? While you were busy pulling hitmen off elevator cables, Zuri chuckled, her voice smooth and playful. I used the emergency trustee access code you gave me last month. I bought out every single one of those foreign debt portfolios from the Macau clearinghouse using the Singapore Educational Grant Fund. I didn't just clear the elders' children. I legally transferred the deeds to their family properties directly into an unalterable trust. Min-Jae let out a breathless, booming laugh that echoed in the dark cabin. You freed their children? I freed their children, wiped their debt, and made myself their sole landlord, Zuri corrected with a wicked wink. If those traditionalist elders want to kick me out for being an outsider, they can explain to their wives why their ancestral estates now belong to a black woman from Atlanta. The massive, iron-forged gates of the traditional Kang estate towered ahead through the curtain of rain. 2 armed syndicate guards holding black umbrellas stepped out into the storm, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Upon recognizing Min-Jae's custom plates, they hastily punched the gate codes, allowing the heavy SUV to roll slowly onto the ancient stone driveway. Traditional wooden lanterns flickered along the perimeter of the courtyard, casting dramatic, dancing shadows over dozens of silent, dark-suited enforcers standing guard under the eaves. Min-Jae parked the vehicle, killed the engine, and turned fully to face his wife. He reached out, gently caressing her cheek with the back of his hand, his thumb tracing her jawline. Tonight, they will try to intimidate you, Zuri, Min-Jae said, his deep voice heavy with fierce protection and profound respect. They will speak in old dialects, they will test your spirit, and they will try to make you feel small in their house. Zuri rested her palm against his chest, feeling the steady, powerful rhythm of his heartbeat beneath his silk tie. Darling, I survived a double major in corporate law and finance at Oxford as the only black woman in my class. A few old men in traditional robes sitting on floor cushions aren't going to make me blink. Min-Jae's dark eyes burned with absolute, unyielding devotion. He leaned across the console, capturing her lips in a fierce, lingering kiss before stepping out into the freezing rain. He opened her door, holding a wide black umbrella over her as she stepped out onto the wet cobblestones, her emerald green blazer sharp against the gloomy, ancient architecture. Together, hand in hand, they climbed the grand wooden steps leading into the main council hall. The doors swung open, revealing a vast, sliding screen room lined with high-ranking syndicate lieutenants. At the head of the room sat the three revered elders, draped in dark, formal silk robes, their faces weathered and unreadable. Standing off to the side, looking disheveled, frantic, but smug, was Director Shin. Elders. Director Shin barked the moment Min-Jae and Zuri crossed the threshold, his voice echoing off the high cedar beams. Look at him. Min-Jae brings an outsider, a foreign woman, into our most sacred hall to address traditional family business. This is an insult to our bloodline. Elder Kwon, the oldest man at the center table, slowly raised a gnarled, paper-thin hand, imposing absolute silence in the room. His piercing, milky gray eyes moved past Min-Jae and settled entirely on Zuri. You are Zuri Kang. Elder Kwon spoke in a low, gravelly Korean dialect, his tone heavy with ancient weight. The woman who dismantled a central banking freeze in 30 minutes. I am, Zuri replied fluently in pristine, formal Korean, stepping forward without a single trace of hesitation, her voice ringing clear as a bell. And I am the woman holding the original deeds to your private estate in Jeju, Elder Kwon. A collective, audible gasp rippled through the dozens of hardened enforcers standing along the walls. Elder Kwon's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated shock. He slowly reached for his traditional tea, his hand visibly trembling as he looked from Zuri to the glowing digital tablet sitting on his low table. Director Shin's face turned completely white. What? What did she just say? Before Shin could process the horror, Zuri calmly reached into her leather briefcase, pulled out a thick stack of stamped legal documents, and slammed them down onto the floor, right in front of the elders. Director Shin tried to leverage your family debts to force your vote tonight, Zuri announced, her eyes sweeping over the entire council with breathtaking authority. He sold out your corporate empire to federal authorities to orchestrate a hostile takeover. But as of 10 minutes ago, his accounts are empty, his shell companies are dissolved, and your children are entirely debt-free. Director Shin panicked. Seeing his entire lifelong scheme crumble in front of his eyes, he reached frantically into his inner coat pocket for a concealed Derringer pistol, aiming it directly at Zuri's heart. You arrogant bitch! Shin screamed, his finger tightening on the trigger. Before Director Shin's finger could even complete the squeeze on the metallic trigger, a deafening, thunderous crack shattered the silence of the ancestral hall. Min-Jae didn't just draw his weapon. He moved with the lethal, blinding speed of a strike from a ghost. A single customized, high-caliber round tore through the heavy air, striking Shin's hand with surgical precision. The small Derringer pistol flew out of Shin's grip, spinning across the polished wooden floor before landing with a harmless clatter right at Zuri's feet. Shin dropped to his knees, clutching his shattered wrist and screaming in agonizing pain, his blood staining the pristine woven mats of the council floor. The entire hall erupted into chaotic shouting. Dozens of Shin's loyal enforcers reached for their weapons, but before a single firearm could be unholstered, the sliding doors along both sides of the grand courtyard burst open simultaneously. 30 elite, heavily armed loyalists from Min-Jae's personal vanguard flooded into the room, their red laser sights instantly painting the chests of every single traitor in the hall. Min-Jae didn't fire another shot. He stepped forward slowly, lowering his smoking barrel, his face a terrifying mask of absolute, unfeeling coldness. The dark ink on his neck seemed to burn against his pale skin under the warm lantern light. You brought a gun into the ancestral hall, uncle, Min-Jae whispered, his deep voice carrying a terrifying weight that silenced the entire room instantly. You tried to murder my wife in front of the elders. That is not just treason against the business. That is a death sentence under our ancient laws. Director Shin, weeping on his knees, looked frantically up at the three-seated elders. Elder Kwan. Help me. He's turning the family over to an outsider. She's taking our property. She's controlling our assets. Elder Kwan slowly set his teacup down. The old man didn't look at Shin with pity, he looked at him with utter disgust. He raised his eyes to Zuri, who stood completely unbothered, her emerald green blazer immaculate, her posture radiating pure, unshakable royalty. She hadn't even flinched when the gun was fired. She didn't steal our assets, Shin, Elder Kwan said, his low, raspy voice echoing through the silent hall. She saved our children from your greed. She protected this family's honor while you were selling our ledger codes to federal agents like a rat in the dark. Elder Kwan looked at the other two elders, who gave unanimous, solemn nods of agreement. The oldest man in the syndicate stood up, adjusting his silk robes, and bowed his head slightly toward Zuri, a gesture of profound respect that no foreign national, and certainly no woman, had ever received in the 200-year history of the Kang Syndicate. The council has reached its verdict, Elder Kwan declared loudly, his voice filling every corner of the room. Shin's rank is stripped. His assets are forfeited to the Central Trust, and he is banished from the Kang family forever. 4 heavy enforcers immediately stepped forward, grabbing the screaming, bleeding director Shin by his shoulders and dragging him out through the heavy wooden doors, his voice fading into the pouring rain outside until there was only silence. Min-Jae holstered his weapon, turning back to face the council. He didn't ask for their applause, nor did he offer an apology for the blood on the floor. He simply walked to Zuri's side, taking her hand into his broad, warm grip. Elder Kwan stepped down from the raised platform, walking slowly over to where the couple stood. The old man looked directly into Zuri's bright, intelligent eyes. You are not just Min-Jae's wife, child. Elder Kwan murmured, a rare, genuine smile cracking his weathered face. You are the mind that keeps this empire alive. As long as you stand beside him, the Kang family will never fall. I don't intend to let it fall, Elder Kwan, Zuri replied smoothly in her flawless Korean, giving a respectful, graceful bow. In fact, tomorrow morning, we begin expanding our tech holdings into European markets. I expect your full support on the board. Elder Kwan let out a wheezing, delighted laugh that loosened the lingering tension in the entire room. You heard the chief trustee, gentlemen. Clear this floor and prepare the victory feast. As the council members began bustling around, clearing the room and pouring expensive traditional rice wine to celebrate, Min-Jae leaned down close to Zuri's ear. You just commandeered the entire traditional council in less than 10 minutes. Min-Jae whispered, his thumb lightly caressing the back of her hand, his dark eyes sparkling with intoxicating devotion. Are you sure you don't want to take over my seat entirely? Oh, darling, Zuri chuckled softly, leaning her head against his shoulder as the soft lantern light reflected in her dark, luminous skin. I already run the seat. You're just the handsome muscle who looks good in a suit. Min-Jae let out a deep, rumbling laugh, pulling her tight against his chest as the rain outside turned into a soft, calming drizzle. Suddenly, Zuri's phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced down at the screen, expecting a routine confirmation from her Singapore bank, but her playful smile instantly vanished. The screen displayed an encrypted red alert from an unknown international number containing a single satellite image, a high-resolution photo of her private childhood home in Atlanta, with a red target reticle hovered directly over the front door. Zuri stared down at the glowing red reticle hovering over her mother's porch in Atlanta. Her blood ran ice-cold for a split second, the background laughter of the celebrating syndicate elders fading into absolute hollow silence. Min-Jae felt the sudden change in her body language immediately. The playful warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by that terrifying, hyper-vigilant focus. He looked down at her phone screen, his sharp jaw clenching so hard a muscle twitched in his cheek. Is that your family's house? Min-Jae asked, his voice a quiet, lethal growl. Before Zuri could answer, a text message flashed beneath the satellite image from the same hidden number. You win in Seoul, Mrs. Kang. But your precious mother pays Shin's debt in Georgia. You have 2 hours to sign the Kang Global Tech grants over to the Western Cartel, or the house burns with her inside. Zuri's hands shook slightly, but her mind, that brilliant, unbreakable machine, didn't break. She took a slow, deep breath, shutting down the fear and locking into absolute strategizing mode. They think I'm an isolated foreigner, Zuri murmured, her dark eyes narrowing into twin points of pure, dangerous fire. They think because I'm 6,000 miles away in South Korea, I left my mother unprotected. Min-Jae immediately reached for his satellite phone, ready to dispatch his elite international vanguard to America. I'm putting 30 heavy enforcers on a private jet right now, Min-Jae. Look at the bottom left corner of that satellite photo, Zuri interrupted, her lips curling into a wicked, chilling smile. Min-Jae leaned in closer. Parked in the shaded driveway of her mother's suburban Atlanta house was a plain, unmarked black van. But painted in subtle, non-reflective dark paint on the side roof was a specific coat of arms, a crest featuring a lion intertwined with an oak leaf. Min-Jae blinked, double-taking in sheer shock. That's the personal tactical crest of the Chief of Police of Atlanta. My uncle Marcus is the Deputy Chief of Police in Georgia, and my brother runs a high-level private security firm for government officials, Zuri said, tossing her head back with a soft, dangerous laugh. Those cartel hitmen think they're pulling up to a quiet house in the suburbs. In reality, they just parked in front of an armed fortress. She picked up her phone and dialed a short, direct line. The call connected on the second ring. "Hey, big brother," Zuri said smoothly into the receiver, her voice filled with pure Atlanta sweetness. "Did a white van with tinted windows just pull up on Mom's street?" "Yeah, sis." Her brother's voice echoed back through the speaker, accompanied by the quiet, heavy click of an assault rifle being chambered. 4 guys in tactical gear stepped out with gas cans. Uncle Marcus already blocked the street with 6 SWAT units. "We were just waiting on your word. Don't shoot to kill if you can help it," Zuri instructed calmly. "Save the leader for questioning. I want the names of every Western executive who funded Shin's offshore accounts by tomorrow morning. Consider it done, baby sis. Tell your handsome billionaire husband we said hello." The call ended with the faint sound of police sirens wailing in the background. Min-Jae stood frozen for a beat, staring at his wife in sheer, breathless awe. "Your family set a counter-ambush in Atlanta before the cartel even finished sending the threat?" "Darling, I'm a Sinclair from Georgia," Zuri smirked, sliding her phone back into her blazer. "You thought you were the only one coming from a family that doesn't play games?" Min-Jae let out a loud, booming laugh that echoed off the ancient wooden beams of the ancestral hall. He grabbed her by her waist, lifting her effortlessly into the air and spinning her around while the surrounding elders cheered, thinking it was a traditional celebration. He set her down gently, cupping her face in his broad hands and kissing her with a fierce, unconditional passion that made her heart race. "You are an absolute force of nature," Zuri Kang Min-Jae breathed against her lips, his dark eyes shining with intense devotion. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure the world knows who really rules this empire." "Good," Zuri winked, smoothing down her blazer one last time. "Now let's go finish that rice wine. We have an international empire to run tomorrow. And that, Annie's Empire of Love family, is how a brilliant black queen completely saved a multi-billion-dollar Korean empire without dropping a single hair out of place." Zuri proved that real power isn't just about guns and muscle, it's about having the sharpest mind in the room. If you loved this high-stakes, unhinged story, do not forget to drop a huge like on this video, smash that subscribe button, and turn on all notifications so you never miss a single upload. Comment below with the word queen if you knew Zuri was going to outsmart everyone from the very beginning. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next dramatic episode on Annie's Empire of Love.